Well, for those of you that have been talking about our entire month, hasn't it been a wonderful and challenging month as we dealt with desperate households? It's been like a whirlwind. Maybe some of you are dizzy with an overload of information. Well, I don't know if I want to use those words, whirlwind and dizzy, because this week I was dizzy. My head felt like it was spinning. A whirlwind that wouldn't let me go. That's a song, actually, if you want to look it up. But I do want to express my love and condolences to the Povos family. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to appreciate. But again, our love stretches out to the entire family, to you, Dad, Pam, and Jack, and a host of other family members. Well, today we're going to be wrapping up our series on desperate households, and I actually trust that in this series you've gleaned something that's been worthwhile, something you can take to your own heart and life, so that your house can literally become a home where love, value, and respect thrive and flourish. Our thoughts today, however, will be from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 24, and also verse 33. I'm going to kind of weave them together. The Apostle Paul is speaking, and he opens up by sharing these words. And this is from the New Living Translation. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Interesting. How many wives are right now kind of bristling with a little bit of emotions? You're probably saying, I wonder where Pastor's going with all of this. Wives, submit yourself to your husbands as to the Lord. For a husband is head of his wife as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body, the church. So again I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. As I was preparing the message for this particular morning, and knowing that we were concluding and wrapping up our thoughts, I came across an illustration of a couple that had been in the neighborhood for quite some time, and just across the street from them, a brand new couple moved in. And it was apparent that they were newlyweds. And the wife was watching this new couple with intensity. Because every night at 5 o'clock when the husband came home from work, he had a gift in hand. His wife literally would meet him on the porch. They would embrace, he would give her a kiss, and hand her a gift. Night after night after night. And the woman observing all this was getting pretty irritated. So finally, when she came to herself, she turned to her husband. She says, have you noticed the neighbors across the street? The husband every day brings a gift for his wife, meets her on the porch, gives her a kiss, and presents the gift. Why can't you do that? He says, honey, I barely know her. Good comeback. I was reading of Norman Vincent Peale, who had been on a train trip. And on this occasion, as he was at the lunch box car having his own lunch, another couple sat across from him. It was an older couple, and it seemed that the wife really was not satisfied with the entire trip. The train was not a smooth ride. The sleeper that they were in wasn't the right sleeper. It wasn't comfortable. Too many stops along the way. And the food, it was disgusting. And so she was complaining, and you know Norman Vincent Peale, he's the author of Positive Thinking, and he's having a hard time trying to figure out exactly what he's going to say to kind of break this conversation and keep it from spinning any further to the negativity. But before he could, the husband spoke up and began to share a little bit about his life, what he did, and those kinds of things. And they got in a pretty good conversation. And then finally, out of nowhere, the husband says, you know, my wife's in the manufacturing business. Norman Vincent Peale was taken back because of her behavior. He says, the manufacturing business, where she manufacture? The husband says, her own unhappiness. Well, as we think of those particulars, have you ever wondered why God allowed this text to be in Scripture? Think of it. Women are told to submit, and men are told to love. Well, let me try to explain, if I can, why the Apostle Paul, through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, used these choices of words. In the Roman Jewish culture, Women were supposed to submit. That was their lot in life. But more than that, they were to be trampled underfoot. A man could do what he wanted with his wife. In fact, we talked about this in times past, that when men prayed, especially the religious leaders prayed, they thanked the Lord that they were a man. And then they list 10 things that they thanked the Lord that they were not. And guess what's at the bottom of that list? The last two, 9 and 10, are a dog and a woman. And nobody knows which came last, the dog or the woman. Because man had disrespect and disregard for women in that culture. And so, ladies, that was your lot. Take it like a woman. Just accept it. That was your life. But then Christ himself came on the scene. And he declared spiritual freedom and deliverance from all who would believe. He helped them understand they were more than just objects and possessions. They were valued. The woman at the well, a beautiful example of how Jesus forced himself into a life of a woman to help her recognize her merit in the eyes of God. Jesus elevated women to the same stature as man. However, some women took this as a license that they no longer had to do anything their husbands asked. They could be totally disrespectful to their husbands and unsubmissive to them. After all, hasn't Christ set them free? And so the Apostle Paul wrote this to make it clear that submission still is a part of God's ultimate plan. It was still his design for relationship. But the word submit here actually means to hold in high regard, not to be walked on, trampled under. You're not a format, ladies. It really means to be hold your husband rather in high regard. Another word is to hold your husband in awe. Now, I like that, because when I walk into the house, I like my wife to say, ah. Usually it's, Now we come to the word love. This was used in regard to men because both Roman and Jewish men got the habit of treating their wives horrendously. Treating their wives, again, as I mentioned, as objects, as possessions. Those under complete dominion, under control, dispose of them at their leisure. And the Apostle Paul pointed out clearly and distinctly that women are more than this. They are people that deserve to be loved and cherished, respected, and held on to, and cared for, and protected. Wow. What a philosophical clash to the culture of that day. And since we're speaking about relationships, then don't ever think that your lot in life is to make your wife an object. Don't ever think that your duty is to change her and make her into everything you want her to be. I think of the newlyweds, that as the man came down to the breakfast table, there was a bowl of cornflakes sitting there for him for breakfast. And he finally turned to his new bride and said, you know, why can't you be more like my mom? Every morning she made me a hot breakfast. Why can't you do that? She snapped back, if you want a hot breakfast, set the cornflakes on fire. So we come to Ephesians 5:22. Submission suggests two qualities that should be evident in a Christian woman: obedience and respect. But let me go on the record to say also to the men that are here, we ought to demonstrate again the quality of respect and adoration towards our wives. Otherwise, they're going to have a difficult time being obedient to us. Penny has no problem in submission, holding me in high regard, if she knows that I always place her best interest at heart. If she knows that the things I do and the decisions I make and the course of action in the household keeps her heart in mind, then she has no problem. But if she thinks I'm being selfish and arrogant and self-promoting, that's a different story altogether. So let's take a look at this first concept, that of obedience. You know, I have done host of weddings through my years, Pastor Judy likewise, and usually as you're preparing for the wedding day itself, you have the groomsmen up front. Sometimes the bridesmaids are up here already. Other times they come down the aisle and they form a position where they've been already set. But in the back is the bride. And the bride's just anxious, waiting for that moment to walk with her father down the aisle. And what's going through her mind on her wedding day? She's thinking, I gotta walk down the aisle, I need to pause at the altar, and then pledge my life to him. So come down the altar, or down the aisle rather, pause at the altar, pledge my life to him. So by the time she's actually arm in arm with her father, she goes, aisle, altar, him. Aisle, altar, him. I'll alter him. You know, one of the biggest issues in kinds of my early relationship as husband and wife was the proper way to hang the toilet paper. I forgot to take that course in college. Listen, marriage isn't a lifetime of chances to change someone else. Don't ever look at it that way. It isn't a safe place for you and me to discover changes we can make within ourselves so we can be a much better spouse, a more attentive and more attractive spouse. Husband and wife were going through some difficulties. It was about the 12th year in their marriage. And they hit a lot of roadblocks. And most of it was just because of personality clashes, idiosyncrasies that they had that were getting on the nerves of one another. And finally the wife, to salvage the marriage, says, look, I think I have a plan. What I'd like us to do is to write down all those things that get underneath our skin. All those things that cause these little disruptions in the relationship. And we're going to do this for a month. And then we're going to go ahead and place them in a designated box. And after a month, we're going to read our suggestions. And the husband listened to this and he said, you know, honey, I think this is something that's good. If I can do anything that will help make our relationship better and make you more happier, I'm willing to do that. So they began this process of writing out her suggestions. And, you know, the wife put down her suggestions. She was looking for, you know, those things that just bothered her, those little faults, those little tiny things that got underneath her nerves. And she was writing them down. And finally the end of the month came. And they were seated at a table, and the husband took his list that the wife had brought ahead and presented to him. And he started reading, and, you know, stuff like, would you please put the jelly lid back on the jelly when you're finished? And would you put another particular lid back down after use? Would you wind up the garden hose when you're done watering the garden? And on the list went. And again, he was reading the list. He said, you're absolutely right. You know, I have been thoughtless. I really have not given attention to these little things I should. Then the wife began to read the suggestions the husband had for her. She looked at the first one, picked up the second one, and said the same thing. Picked up the third one, and the same thing. All three said the same thing. Each one said, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Folks, it's easy to find fault with one another, isn't it? It doesn't have to be a marriage. It can be anywhere. It's so easy to pick out all the problems and all the things we dislike in somebody else. It's easy for us not only to find faults, but to expect improvements. And even to improve for our sake. It's only through the lens of agape love and grace that we learn to love someone in full view of their shortcomings and their faults. On Tuesday night, I shared this with the Bible study group. I cannot fathom how God has given Penny the capacity to love me. And I say that with complete honesty. You know me as Pastor Norm. She knows me as Norm. You know me as your minister. She knows me on days when I'm an absolute mess. And yet, somehow, some way God's given her the ability to love you in spite of all of that. Some time ago, there was an international stir surrounding the wedding of Prince Edward and Sophia. The reason that this stir took place is Sophia included in the wedding vows the word obey. And the news media went ballistic. Why in the world would you, as a princess, even think of including the word obey? That's archaic. It's all too traditional. This is a whole new age for womanhood. I love how Sophia responded to all the critics in the media. And I quote, "I have no problem with the word obey. It simply is a matter of trust. I trust Prince Edward's love for me and that his judgments and decisions will always have my best interest at heart." End of quote. Isn't that powerful? Hey, isn't that kind of obedience that Christ asks of you and I? To trust him enough, realizing that he always operates with our best interest in his heart and in his mind. So this word obey, that's a great word in helping to construct a godly marriage. But the second concept is respect or honor. You know, Gary and Smalley did this whole series on marriage enrichment. And he talked about this word submit, meaning to hold in high regard, and also the awe moment. Men, how many of you would love to walk into the house and your wife goes, "Ah, my husband's home"? Nobody? Okay. How many would not want this? "Oh, my husband's home. He's going to complain about something. Is the food ready? Did you take care of the kids? Is the house clean? There's going to be something on the list that's not going to make him happy." I pray we can kind of override that and come to the moment. I need to say, and I'm being a little transparent, but I love it when Penny gives me the moment. I love that look, not the look. Let me qualify right now, not you men know the look. Usually when you get the look, it's a night on the couch. I'm talking about that look. You know, that twinkle in her eye. And even when I can be a pretty pathetic case for a husband at times, she still lavishes me with her love and respect and honor. I don't deserve it, but somehow God's given her the ability to do it. Understand that respect is both a verb and a noun, an action and an attitude. So begin today, wives, to try within your power to respect your husband. And husbands, right now, learn the capacity to respect your wife. And respect her in her thoughts, in her words, and in her deeds. You know, they say that housework goes unnoticed unless it goes undone. Well, husbands, take notice of the housework. Take notice if your wife goes and does something with her hair that's different. Take notice of the small things and bring them up and acknowledge them in your life. Your spouse will be more willing and able to give you the love and affection that you are looking for if she or he feels valued and admired. You know, Rodney Dangerfield had this wonderful expression, "I get no respect." In fact, Phil Kine developed an apple for me that I was going to bring up here today because, you know, there's times in my message when I just don't feel anybody's paying attention. I'm just slamming out the pulpit. I get no respect. Hear me, up front, look this way. Because, you know, I think that's true. A lot of times we feel, as people, we get no respect whatsoever. Men have compiled, and I just came across this, a list of 10 things they wish their wives would understand about that. Now, I had to go with the men's list because the wife's list is too long. I didn't have time to cover it in this morning's message. So I'm just going to go with a list of 10 things that men want most out of their wives. Guess what the number one was on the list? The number one thing on the list was respect. The list went on to indicate how that respect can be shown. And I'm going to share that with you. 1, believe in his abilities. 2, give affirmation in his accomplishments. 3, less chatter. Now, when I shared that this morning, my wife started actually laughing out loud. Because I'm the talker in our household, not her. And there's times I will talk and talk and talk, and she's like, oh, please, will that bad thing ever run dry? And this is no joke. There are times I'm lying in bed telling her about the things of the day, and I turn over and be quiet, please. So I can't really blame her on the chatter part. Then show greater trust and genuine companionship. But as I went through the list, there was something that actually caught my attention. It just kind of popped off the pages. Men do not want their wives to lose their identity or their individuality. I thought that was awesome. They don't want their wives to change. They don't want their wives to go ahead and become something they're not. They want to hold on to their identity and their individuality. And they said that's the very thing that attracted us to them in the first place. That's what drew us to them. Almost like, the Billy Joel song. Don't change you. Try to please me. I love you just the way you are. Okay. I'll stick with my day job. I'm going to ask the praise team if they would come back to the platform at this time. I want to wrap up by sharing a great contrast. Now, I want you to listen to all of it before you pass judgment this morning. But in 1997, an unparalleled event happened in our midst. Lady Diana died in a tragic car accident. But did you know that in that same week, Mother Teresa passed away as well? What a contrast in these two women's lives and in their deaths. Princess Diana, she looked like a flower. Mother Teresa looked like cowflower. One was a goddess surrounded by servants, while the other was a servant surrounded by God. One was a celebrity, the other a saint. One was a slave to materialism, whereas the other was a slave to Christ. And even a great contrast in their dying remarks. It's reported that Lady Di cried out to those that were trying to pull her from the wreckage, "Get away from me, leave me alone." However, Mother Teresa gained consciousness just before she died, and they said that she echoed out, "I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus." Diana left with a plea on her lips, Mother Teresa with a prayer on hers. And at the funeral of Princess Diana, the gospel of Jesus Christ was never once mentioned. With millions of people watching and listening, no one spoke of the hope of the resurrection. But quite opposite with Mother Teresa. At her funeral, everything centered around her devotion to Christ. Princess Diana is revered because of her death. Mother Teresa is revered because of her life. And while flashbulbs were always going off in Diana's face, Teresa of Calcutta wanted the world only to see the face of Jesus. Now, I don't share that out of any disrespect for Lady Di. That's not what I'm trying to vindicate. I'm just showing a contrast in the lives of two individuals. One was noted for her reputation. The other was noted for her relationship in obedience to the Lord. May the spirit that God granted Mother Teresa be the actual spirit among you and I here at this place today. Lord, teach us the beauty and the power of your word. What blessings flow, what joys are expressed, what promises are received when we simply trust and obey. And I'm asking the Lord will help our ladies today to fully understand his will and purpose in this thing called submission. May our ladies' lives reflect servanthood and beauty of godly women, women filled with the Holy Spirit. And I ask the Lord that He'll help our men here today demonstrate agape love to their wives. A love that knows no boundaries. A love that knows no limits. A love that completes, protects, and values one's spouse. Let there not be the emptiness and the void that comes when we try to do marriage and relationships and life our own way. When we try to pursue our own passions. May God's power flow among us now, this moment, and in the days ahead. Let's stand.